What's up, Neon players and Grandma Slayers? We're finally here with the dodge strafing tutorial. You guys have been asking a lot about dodge strafing stuff, rotational and directional strafing, what that means. We're going to be going over all of that, the basics of strafing, how it works, stuff like momentum theory, and hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to be doing stuff like this. You guys are martial still? Hold on, watch this shit. Spectate me if you're listening. Make sure to join our Discord where me or any of our coaches can help you with your movement questions. You can even send in a clip of you trying out your Neon moves in the movement help channel and we can take a look at what you can improve on. Alright, so in this video we're going to go over what directional and rotational movement is, what dodge strafing is, and teach you the fundamentals of strafing so that you can do it yourself. Let's start with what is directional and rotational strafing. As most of you are aware, directional strafing refers to a forward or backward strafe that is used to turn relative to the direction you are facing. Rotational strafing is a sideward strafe that rotates your character around a center point. Later in the video, we're going to discuss in more detail what the center point is and try to explain the reason it is called a rotational strafe. Notice how both directional and rotational strafes can be used to achieve the same overall movement. We have a forward directional strafe to the left, a forward directional strafe to the right, a backward directional strafe to the right, a backward directional strafe to the left, forward rotationals, and backward rotationals. Now, what is dodge strafing? In my previous tutorial, I say this. Strafe dodging is comprised of an initial rotational strafe, which then transitions into a directional strafe. Now that is not entirely accurate. Although dodge strafing can be done with a rotational into a directional strafe, that is not the only way to do it. Dodge strafing is the act of quickly moving yourself on the horizontal axis of your enemy's aim and making yourself as hard to shoot as possible. Ultimately, it's up to you how you want to accomplish this, as long as you are getting that horizontal movement. Here are a couple examples of combos that all achieve this movement. Now, let's look at the fundamentals of strafing in order to find out how we can achieve these combos. When moving in Valorant, and this applies to any agent, not just Neon and or Sprint, there will always be a momentum key and a turn key. The momentum key is what drives the speed in the direction that you are going. The turn key is what helps you strafe. If you want to strafe in any way, you have to have both keys. If you try to strafe without the turn key, you will not turn. In a directional strafe, the momentum key will always be either W or S, and the turn keys will always be either A or D. During a rotational strafe, the momentum keys will always be either A or D, and the turn keys will always be W or S. Speaking of rotational strafes, let's understand why they are called that. Unlike a directional strafe, where your character is turning in the direction that your camera is facing, in a rotational strafe, your character rotates around a pivot point. That pivot point can be anything you choose to focus on. Typically, I like to think I'm rotating around my crosshair. However, that quickly becomes confusing when you start doing backwards rotational strafes, because the crosshair is in front of you, and you're rotating around the back. In this case, it's helpful to imagine the pivot point as something physical in the game world. For example, this pillar half thing doohickey. I'm gonna call it Bhop because I really don't know what this is called.
Go, go, go!
When I'm doing a rotational strafe, notice how I'm rotating around Bhop. And the exact same thing occurs when you're doing a backwards rotational strafe. Think of it like you're attached to the pivot point with a rope and you're swinging around it. Virtually all of the movement you see in my gameplay and any other Neon all boils down to momentum theory. Momentum theory states that momentum cannot be switched to the opposite direction and can only be transferred to the adjacent direction. Here's an example. Let's say that we're going in the forward direction and want to reverse and go in the backward direction. What we know from momentum theory is if we try to switch directly, it's going to kill our speed. What we also know is that we can turn and convert that momentum to the adjacent direction using a strafe. However, just turning doesn't help us achieve our goal of going in the backward direction. So, what can we do? We can use adjacent directions as bridges to get to opposite directions. So if our current direction is W, which is forward, and we want to get to S, which is backward, we know that our adjacent key currently is A and D. Let's say that we switch our direction to the D key. Now our adjacent directions are W and S, which means we can switch to S without losing any momentum because S is now an adjacent direction as well. Now let's quickly cover the basics of transitions. When you are transitioning from one strafe type to another, for example directional to rotational, it is important to first switch your momentum key before you switch your turn key, that way you keep your speed. If you switch your turn key first and then your momentum key, then you will lose all of your speed and the transition will not be successful. I've gotten some questions on how I'm able to perform a rotational strafe when I'm going forwards. Fundamentally, that's also just a transition. Here I'm going to show you an exaggerated version of what I do in order to accomplish this movement. When I'm going forward, first I'm going to let go of any of my keys mid-air, turn my camera to the side, that way I'm technically moving sideways, press my momentum key to the right, and then press my turn key in order to perform my rotational strafe. Now that we have all the information necessary to achieve these movements, how do we practice them? When it comes to learning rotational strafing, I recommend two things. The first is the red box method. This practice method was created by Nafi, or as he's known in our Discord server, the Speed Professor. He's one of our main movement coaches and is the reason so many people in the Discord have gotten that much better at neon movement. The idea of the red box method is to stay within the red box loading zone while you're doing your rotational strafes. If you go outside of the box, that means that you haven't done the strafe correctly.
Running low. My ult's ready.
The other method to practice rotational strafing is the Bhop method. Like I mentioned earlier, imagine that you're connected to Bhop with a rope and are forced to stay around him as you're doing your rotational strafes. If you want to practice your transitions between strafe types, I recommend finding a zigzag area such as this one on the cat entrance to tree on Ascent, and starting with one strafe type on one side, and as you go through the zigzag, switch to the other strafe type to finish it off. Once you're comfortable with doing these transitions, I suggest going to a tighter zigzag, such as the one in Double Doors on Haven. And those are the fundamentals of strafing. Before we end this video, I wanted to answer some common questions and give you guys some tips that may help you along your neon movement journey. So one of the most common questions is there a point in crouching during your Bhop? A lot of people see me and other neon mains doing it and then start to wonder. There is no point of crouching unless you're trying to clear or get up to a higher surface. The reason you see people crouching all the time is most likely because they come from CS. In Counter-Strike, there's a movement tech for B-hopping that involves crouching, but it does not exist in Valorant. Another question is, should I use spacebar or mouse wheel to B-hop? Although it is possible to do so with both, I recommend the mouse wheel, as it is a lot easier to be consistent. That being said, there are still some muscle memory gods that B-hop on spacebar pretty well, such as Gloomy, but he's been doing it for many years. That brings us to the end of the video. I hope this guide has helped explain the kinks of strafing, and if you have any questions, you can ask me on Twitter, Twitch chat, or even the coaches on our Discord. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.